Chapter 7. A Late Night Challenge. I suppose you could say that I had reached a personal milestone. I was now certain that I knew absolutely nothing about the Indigenous Church, at least not what it should look like in Central Asia. It was completely beyond me. I was forced to admit that I had yet to see anything that could honestly be classified as indigenous, and worst of all, I did not even know where to look. It may be difficult for some to appreciate what a loathsome place this was, but try to envision it. I had spent great sums of other people's money. My family and I had traveled halfway around the world so that I could be the expert, that is, the missionary. Instead, I was compelled to admit that I knew nothing. Zilch! This was a humiliating moment of self-awareness which I would have gladly kept all to myself had it not been for writing this book. Around the same time, something else came into view. It started out small and troubling to see, but in time it grew to become a great fire tower. Torches blazing into the sky. Its light completely revealed my ignorance. Thankfully, it also illuminated something of much greater importance. By its light, I began to see who it was that would know what an indigenous church should look like. This heavenly sign first came into view when I visited some friends. Akim John and his wife Rena were going through hard times. Their difficulties were probably the same as those of any who would dare to pioneer a church among their own people. It is hard work to shepherd precious souls as they are fleeing Islam to find refuge in Isa as their tower of deliverance. Akim John and Rena were pouring out their lives in a difficult place under trying circumstances. For the most part, their reward had been a slap in the face. They knew that their master had warned that it would be this way, but this knowledge did not make things easier. One beautiful spring day, shortly after the ice melted off the mountain pass, I went to see Akim John and Rena with the hope that I could give some good counsel to somehow help them in their troubles. In time, however, I would realize that it was I who got the better end of the deal that day. In retrospect, I received much more valuable advice than I gave that night. The evening wore on, and late into the night, under a bare 40-watt bulb, I was still listening to those unpretentious servants of God pour out their disappointment and anger. Most of it came from the same things that hurt church leaders back home: gossip, unforgiveness, backbiting, and the like. As someone who has been in that position before, I could counsel them through this kind of pain. However, they also faced hurts that most pilgrims will never know. In addition to the normal church problems, they also had to cope with the sinful attitudes of missionaries. Now, rest assured, most missionaries I know are true saints. I really mean that. Few of them ever commit any big sins, but it is the inconspicuous little things such as spiritual pride that have caused many a missionary pilgrim to become hopelessly lost. I'm referring to the kind of spiritual pride that develops during the years of study and preparation for missions, the kind that makes us slow to listen but quick to give advice. This pride puffs the head up with knowledge, even while the heart withers from a lack of grace. It is a devious enemy, especially hard to see when it is stuck in one's own eye. But on this night, by the grace of God, someone began to remove the log from mine. The blindness began to clear as I heard my friends tell what they see when we missionaries indulge in this subtle sin. I heard of the pain we often cause the very people we say we love. Normally, such a distasteful subject would never be allowed to come up with guests, not in Central Asia, where hospitality and saving face are so important. However, In the course of conversation that evening, I could tell that there was something bothering my friend, but Akim John would not say what. So I probed. "Something is bothering you, Akim," I said. "What is it? You know, we can talk about anything." The look on his face told me I had hit a nerve, but true to his culture, he stonewalled me. So I gently pushed some more. After much prodding, he finally said, "Oh, you really don't want to know." My nerves were still frazzled and my body sore from the bone-jarring 6-hour taxi ride to Akim John's house, and this quick offhand dismissal would not do. I pushed one more time, insisting, "Yes, I do. I really do want to know what you're thinking." I have always heard that there is something in Central Asian culture about asking 3 times. I do not know if that was it, but the genie came out of the bottle. As Akim John began to speak, his tone was not cross, and his expression was not angry. However, his words were uttered with the surety of a man who had given long thought to the subject at hand. "Missionaries are often difficult to work with," he said. "They don't treat us with very much respect." He was referring to himself and his wife. "Sometimes they ask our opinion, but they really don't want to know what we think. They actually just want us to agree with their ideas and plans." I listened intently as he continued, "And it is the same for all of us," he said, broadening the scope to include other Central Asian church leaders we both knew. "On a few occasions we have been honest and said what we really thought, but our opinion did not matter. The missionaries still did exactly what they wanted. They didn't listen to us." Even before he was done speaking, I was contemplating my response. Of course, this kind of thing happens from time to time, I thought. We're all human, brother. In addition, I did not miss the polite way he used the third person, the missionaries. I knew he was trying to be careful, but since I, too, am one of the missionaries, I was somewhat offended. I knew I never acted this way. Now that I had coaxed him out of his cultural norms, I decided that we should follow mine. Being an American, I am well versed at using honesty as a bludgeon to silence dissent. As Christians, we do it all the time, in the spirit of speaking the truth in love, of course. So I proceeded to tell Akim John that even if some missionary had hurt him personally in the past, this was not the norm. Perchance there was some unforgiveness in his heart that he needed to deal with. To tell you the truth, I was a bit disappointed in Akim John. He was normally very mature, and I thought him a very spiritual man. So why was he behaving so differently tonight? He responded with the same surety as before, issuing me a simple challenge. "Check it out. Ask the others I mentioned. See what they say, if you can get them to speak openly about it with you." The way his voice stressed the word "if" was a reminder that in Central Asian culture, honored friends are treated with utmost respect. It can be very hard to extract an honest opinion from a friend when they think it will hurt your feelings. Nevertheless, Akim John's challenge disturbed me enough that I still had to try. I was sure I would prove him wrong. Many questions, painful answers. So I started asking questions, lots of questions. Over the next few months, I pushed, I probed. I probably embarrassed some of my Central Asian friends by my quest for the truth. In their worldview, some things are better left unsaid, but I pushed until it came out. Eventually, even their cultural taboo against offending friends could not hide it. To my shame, I found out that Akim John was right, so right that it made me ill. Every Central Asian leader with whom I spoke echoed his assessment. Oh, they were very polite and indirect about it. It is their culture. But in each case, after skirting around the issue, They all agreed that most missionaries do not want to know what local believers think. It is often irrelevant to us. When we want to do something, we just do it. Maybe it has something to do with the fact that we control all the resources. This painful truth stung like a scorpion in my shoe, again and again. How could I get away from the indictment? How many times had I personally been guilty? I started to realize that I usually value my own opinion much more than I honor the wisdom that comes from living one's whole life in Central Asia. Furthermore, when I so casually discard the advice of these mature men of God, I project a lack of respect for them personally. Ouch. So painful was the glimpse of this sign that something had to give. I could not really hear what they were saying and just keep doing ministry as usual. I had to either write it off as a mirage or follow it as a sign from heaven. I chose the latter. My ideas about missions and ministry slowly began to change. I realized I could push my own agenda by exploiting the tremendous respect I am given as a missionary, or I could draw on this respect and influence the ideas that arise indigenously. I could offer my years of experience in Bible training as a resource to local leadership, or I could use their gifts as a resource for myself, but I could not do both. Until now, I had actually missed the meaning of the word indigenous. I had failed to see that it means a way of thinking that I, as a foreigner, would never completely understand. So I started asking more questions than I answered. I started trusting local leaders more, and myself and other missionaries less. When the trauma of having a log wrenched from my eye wore off, I started anxiously searching the horizon for other fire towers. I had found one extremely precious sign and did not want to miss any others that might continue to guide my journey. Without a doubt, Akim John's late-night challenge grew to be the most important point of navigation on my pilgrimage. It showed me many of the places where I had wandered lost. Its light cast long shadows on many of the things that I had previously been so sure of, and pointed me in a new but unfamiliar direction. Whereas in the past I thought I knew so much, now I had only questions, lots of them. I simply did not know how to find the goal that I so greatly desired, an indigenous church among this people in Central Asia. But now I realized that, like divine torches in the night sky, there were people who could point the way, people who would reveal to me their secrets if I asked the right questions and started really listening. As is true with all pilgrimages, this journey was beginning to teach me much about myself, probably much more than I would ever teach others. As I began to walk this new trail, something else happened. For the first time, I found myself willing to admit that I was not some religious expert, only a simple pilgrim, no more, no less. I did not know everything, and I finally did not feel like I had to.